Beverly Hills emergency.
Yes, police.
What's the problem?
Seven,
What's the problem? What's the problem?
someone killed my parents.
Pardon me?
Someone killed my parents.
What? Who?
On August 20th, 1989, one of the most famous 911 calls in true crime history was phoned in from the Beverly Hills area of Los Angeles.
What happened?
On the line was 21-year-old Lyle Menendez, and heard screaming in the background of the call was his brother, 18-year-old Eric. Lyle reported that someone had killed his parents in their Beverly Hills home, as he was almost unintelligible and extremely distraught over the incident.
Is the person still there?
What happened? We have units around. What happened? Who shot who?
Or was he?
Hello, this is police department.
Yes.
Okay, I want you to come outside. Okay, please come out the front door and
My brother.
The case of the Menendez brothers was one of the most controversial trials of the 1990s, and the allegations which arose were arguably influenced by Jose Menendez's wealth, proving people will say and do anything for money. So what was the real motive for the murder of Jose and Kitty Menendez? Was it past trauma? Or was it the family fortune? The answer begins on the island nation of Cuba. Eric and Lyle's father, Jose Menendez, was born in Havana, Cuba in 1944. After the Cuban Revolution began, Jose moved to the United States at the age of 16. He learned English after arriving in the U.S. and attended Southern Illinois University, where he met his future wife, Kitty. Kitty and Jose were married in 1963 and moved to New York City, where their first son, Lyle, was born. Their younger son, Eric, was born after the family moved to New Jersey, and in 1986, the family of four relocated to Beverly Hills for Jose's corporate career in the entertainment industry. Some might say Jose Menendez's story was the American dream. Having been born in a politically tumultuous country, without knowing English and moving to a country and becoming a CEO in the entertainment industry, launched Jose's sense of importance to unfathomable heights.
Jose Menendez is chairman of the board, president, and chief executive officer of Live Entertainment, joining us here in Los Angeles. And I should point out, this is the company, folks, that brings you the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles video, which seriously is a hot video right now.
It is. So the company is broad-based and it provides pretty much what the consumer wants.
Jose was a ruthless worker, and his bosses praised him for working 24/7. He had the commitment most bosses want in an employee, but Jose's tendencies had its ups and downs. Colleagues commented that Jose was a pleasure to work with, but they would hate to work for him. He would consistently berate and humiliate people in meetings, and he absolutely loved firing people. Jose also loved Christmas time because it meant he could threaten to take away holiday bonuses from employees simply to see them panic. One of Jose's mottos was,
cheat, steal, lie, but win.
He instilled this rigorous and unethical philosophy to his family and in business. Lyle and Eric were to find success in individual sports and excel from a young age, and Jose's strategy to turn his sons into the legacy he modeled for himself was to pay coaches, instructors, and teachers abhorrent amounts of money to create Eric and Lyle's talents, but only on his terms. Jose would host motivational seminars for his own sons. They also had a creed which had to be recited each morning.
If I feel depressed, I will sing. If I feel sad, I will laugh. If I feel fear, I will plunge ahead. I will be master of my emotions.
It was known that Jose was having an affair that lasted over 8 years, even after it was known to his wife Kitty. When asked about his sexual prowess, a colleague commented,
Jose would f an umbrella.
Jose's ego and narcissism would run in the family, thanks to his overbearing expectations of success. Lyle and Eric became disliked by many people. Essentially, they were rich kids who were bullies. Lyle was by far the dominant brother between him and Eric. Lyle was being groomed to be the heir to the $15 million fortune accumulated by his father. But Eric cried a lot and was prone to being fragile and emotional. At one point, Jose and Kitty suspected Eric was homosexual, and Kitty gave him a 6-month ultimatum to find a girlfriend. Needless to say, it didn't work out. Despite Jose's push for his son's success, they were falling short. Lyle was accepted to Princeton University, but he was kicked out his freshman year for cheating on a Psychology 101 exam. And Eric was still living at home with Kitty and Jose, and occasionally traveling to play in semi-professional tennis tournaments. Jose became incredibly disappointed in the sons who weren't living up to his expectations. And in 1989, there was a discussion had with Jose's best friend who said that Lyle and Eric were going to be cut out of Jose's will. Not only that, Jose was going to cut off his sons completely. Being narcissists just like their father, Lyle and Eric had incredibly fragile egos, and their sense of reality was extremely distorted. They couldn't conceptualize opinions or emotions other than their own, and their self-importance and self-esteem was directly tied to their wealth. A psychology expert proposed that because Jose forbade his sons to have their own experiences and develop their own lives, that he was actually hindering their self-esteem, thus their inability to recover from news, such as getting cut off.
Pain training.
Yes, he did.
And could you tell us about that?
He told me that I was the biggest sissy and the biggest coward he had ever seen in his entire life, and that he was ashamed to have me as a son because I couldn't take the pain and I couldn't be brave from what he had seen.
It was around this time that Lyle and Eric began to seriously plot the murder of their parents. The plan itself was relatively simple. They would murder Kitty and Jose, blame it on a mob hit, establish an alibi, and collect the inheritance money. Since wealth established so much of Lyle and Eric's self-importance, killing their parents didn't seem like a far-fetched idea. But that's because they were sociopaths in the making. And anything a sociopath does is to advance their own personal gain. The plan was to shoot their parents in the knees, a method that would hopefully indicate the mob as potential suspects. Using a stolen ID from a friend, Lyle purchased 2 Mossberg 12-gauge shotguns days before the murder in August 1989. A few weeks before the murders, Lyle and Eric happened to view a made-for-TV movie called Billionaire Boys Club.
Well-educated from a wealthy family, and you don't want to wade through a lot of corporate garbage to get to the top, right? Who does? People who can't do it any other way.
The plot of Billionaire Boys Club became essential to the inspiration of Kitty and Jose's murders. The movie was even released by Live Entertainment and its CEO, Jose Menendez. With the guns acquired, the next step was simple: murder Kitty and Jose Menendez. While Kitty and Jose were watching The Spy Who Loved Me on TV in their Beverly Hills home late at night, Lyle and Eric burst into the living room with their 2 illegally purchased shotguns. Lyle fired 2 shots at Jose, one in the left elbow and another to the chest. Upon the shots, Kitty screamed and started fleeing the room when Eric shot Kitty in the leg to immobilize her. With Jose incapacitated on the couch, Lyle pushed the barrel of the gun into his father's head and pulled the trigger, leaving a contact wound on his skull. After Jose was dead, Eric shot Kitty 7 more times, but needed to reload because she still wasn't dead. Lyle went over to his father to deliver the shots to the knee to indicate they were murdered by the mob, and Eric to his mother to shoot her in the knees and in the face to ensure she was dead. With Kitty and Jose dead at their Beverly Hills home, Lyle and Eric left to go establish their alibi. they went to eat at the popular chain restaurant The Cheesecake Factory and tried to see the new James Bond movie, License to Kill. The movie was sold out, so they opted to see Batman for a second time. After they returned to Beverly Hills, Lyle called 911 to report their discovery.
Beverly Hills emergency?
Yes, please.
What's the problem? What's the problem? What's the problem?
Someone killed my parents.
Pardon me?
Someone killed my parents.
What? Who? Are they still there?
Yes.
The people...
No.
Were they shot?
Hey, man,
Were they shot?
Yes.
They were shot?
Yes.
The police arrived at the Menendez home to talk to a hysterical Lyle and Eric before they left for the night. Based on the 911 calls they received, police believed Lyle and Eric initially, but standard procedure calls for a gunshot residue test to be performed by individuals who lived and had access to the home. And Lyle and Eric were never given a gunshot residue test. Even though the test wasn't performed, it wouldn't take long for investigators to suspect Lyle and Eric were the killers of their own parents. Early the following morning, the coroner, crime scene unit, and other teams were still at the Menendez home processing the crime scene. Lyle and Eric showed up at the home to collect their tennis rackets at 5:30 a.m., which was odd behavior being exhibited by two sons who were frantically distraught on calls to 911 just hours earlier. The police didn't have to dig deep to start seeing a questionable pattern of behavior from Lyle and Eric. It would only be 3 days after the murders when an exorbitant spending spree began. In the 6 months following the murders, $1 million would be spent by Lyle and Eric, with $700,000 of that money being spent in the first few weeks alone. Lyle purchased a restaurant in New Jersey, and Eric hired a private tennis coach and bought his way into several semi-professional tennis tournaments. They also purchased courtside Knicks tickets and happened to be photographed in the background of the photo that made its way onto Mark Jackson's NBA Hoops basketball trading card, a rare but morbid collector's item. In an incredibly suspicious move, Lyle and Eric hired a computer expert to wipe the hard drives of the family computer. Their hopes were that any wills or documents that excluded the brothers from the family's inheritance would be deleted, and that their collection of Jose's life insurance policy and fortune would go according to plan. When contacted later by law enforcement officials, the computer expert said the entire experience made his skin crawl. Meanwhile, the police were taking an intense look into the murders of Kitty and Jose, while the brothers both shot their parents in each of their knees to make it look like a mob hit. The police noticed something was seriously off. Hollywood depicts mob hits with a whack to the knee, but this tactic isn't always accurate. Usually, when the mob does commit murders, they do it quickly and silently. It's clean, simple, and often the body is disposed of to get rid of any lingering evidence. But this was not the case with Kitty and Jose. Not only were their bodies left at the scene of the crime, but the murder was a crime of passion. They were both shot several times. Neither were executed in a style that indicated the mob had any involvement with their murders. And so, the focus switched solely to Lyle and Eric. With Lyle being the dominant sibling, he had kept his mouth shut about any possible connection to the murder of his parents. Eric, however, was starting to crack in the months following the incident. 12 days after the murders, Eric was playing chess with a friend one afternoon. In the middle of the game, Eric said,
"You want to know how we did it?"
Eric gave some details about the murders, but then the chess game resumed. 2 months after the murders, Eric confessed again to his therapist, a psychologist who saw both Eric and Lyle as patients at the instruction of their father. Lyle and Eric were under the assumption that they were seeing Dr. Jerome Oziel in confidence, and that they were protected by doctor-patient confidentiality. But Dr. Oziel was feeding information back to Jose after their sessions. during the session where Eric confessed. He arrived agitated and distraught over seeing photos of the crime scene in the media. Dr. Oziel suggested that he and Eric take a walk to calm his nerves. But it was on this walk where Eric stopped to lean against a parking meter and said,
"We did it."
To further the case against the Menendez brothers, police got a friend to wear a wire and meet Eric to get a slam dunk confession when the case went to trial. But when asked about the murders, Eric denied any involvement. But Eric's confession didn't end with Dr. Oziel. Oziel's girlfriend, Judalyn Smith, overheard the session with Eric about the confession. When Smith later broke up with Oziel after finding out he had 2 other girlfriends, Smith approached the police to tell them about Eric's confession as some petty but loaded revenge.
It's not supposed to happen in Beverly Hills. A movie executive and his wife were brutally slain in their $1 million mansion. There were no clues and no suspects. Police speculated it was a professional hit. But now there's a shocking new development in the case. Hard Copy has learned exclusively that the Beverly Hills police have uncovered details of a murder plot as twisted as any movie mystery.
On March 8, 1990, 7 months after the murders of Kitty and Jose, Lyle was arrested for first-degree murder, and Eric turned himself into police 3 days later after returning from a tennis trip to Israel.
Both charges carry special circumstances for which you could be sentenced to death. Eric Galen Menendez, how do you plead?
I'm guilty, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Joseph Lyle Menendez, to the charge in the charges in the amended complaint, how do you plead?
Not guilty.
As soon as Lyle and Eric were arrested, the media circus truly began, even though opening arguments at their trial wouldn't begin for another 3 years.
California, a jury hears opening statements today in the trial of 2 Beverly Hills brothers accused of murdering their wealthy parents.
The unusual trial is being conducted with 2 juries, one for each brother. Already the trial has drawn national media attention.
News media nationwide was focused on the high-profile case of the 2 affluent boys who murdered their millionaire parents. When the trial officially started, people were so glued to the coverage that the trial eventually spawned the creation of the Court TV television station.
The Menendez trial draws some unlikely players into its web on this Tuesday, July 27, 1993.
Prosecution of Lyle and Eric underway, the extended Menendez family firmly stood behind Eric and Lyle. But once the defense team started, the family's allegiance to the Menendez brothers became obvious.
The defense will claim the boys were abused by their parents. One defense attorney has told the judge she plans to use a self-defense strategy.
We have evidence that will prove that they were experiencing fear, that they were in imminent danger of death or great bodily injury at the hands of their parents.
Attorneys for the Menendez boys say they will use the same defense employed for battered women. Homicide as self-defense.
Lyle and Eric were being tried by 2 separate juries, one for each of them. And when each of them took the stand in their own defense, they highlighted emotional and sexual abuse from both of their parents, but specifically Jose.
Did your father have sexual contact with you?
Yes.
And how did it start?
It just started with, after sports practices, he would massage me. And we would have these talks, and he would show me, and he would fondle me, and he would ask me to do the same with him, and I would touch him, and we would undress.
Where would this take place?
In my bedroom. We would be in the bathroom, and he would put me on my knees, and he would guide me, all my movements, and I would have oral sex with him.
Did you want to do this? Did you ask him not to?
Yes.
How did you ask him not to?
I just told him, I don't. He told me that he was going to train me how not to, not to feel pain, not to have to feel the hurt of the pain. He would stick things in me as he was giving me oral sex, or at times he would just sit on the bed with his legs up, spread, and with his back to the back of the bed, and he would have me give me oral sex, and he would stick the needles or the tacks into my thighs as he was doing this.
There were now two sides the family could join. If the extended family supported the brothers during their trials and provided testimony about their abuse, and they were found not guilty, they would be included in Jose's inheritance. Or if they didn't agree with Lyle and Eric's actions, and the two were found guilty, there would be no inheritance for the extended family. While the defense's goal was to make them look childish, young, and innocent, several of Lyle and Eric's statements on the abuse were unusual. Eric talked about how Jose would often light candles to make the mood more romantic, even though when it comes to sexual abuse, it's never romantic or about love. It's about power, manipulation, and control. While the claims were outrageous, they were believable to a jury. Eric and Lyle played up their emotions and sold their testimonies the best they could. They were murderers, but were they also victims? Other extended family members testified that Eric and Lyle had either asked questions about sexual abuse which indicated their father, or they explained details about the abuse when they were a young age. But each member of the extended Menendez family had an end goal, a piece of the inheritance. The trial was controversial in the family, but also for the rest of the country who was viewing daily live coverage. The public seemed to fall into one of three opinions.
Number 1. The brothers were never abused and they killed for the inheritance money of $15 million. Number 2. They were abused but didn't have the right to kill their parents. Number 3. They were abused and did have the right to kill their parents.
But the prosecution focusing on the motive of the inheritance money, and the defense focusing on self-defense as means to end the abuse the brothers faced, caused a mistrial by hopelessly deadlocking the jury.
With the Eric Menendez jury deadlocked, a mistrial has been declared in his case.
In Los Angeles today, a mistrial for Lyle Menendez.
Eric and Lyle would go to a new trial, this time with some tighter restrictions. For their second trial, there would be no television cameras allowed in the courtroom, and Lyle and Eric would be subject to the same jury, and not separate juries for each of the defendants. After their second trial, the jury returned after 4 days of deliberation. Lyle and Eric would be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the charges of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder.
2 trials later, Lyle and Eric Menendez were formally sentenced today in Los Angeles for the brutal murders of their parents. Following the recommendation of the jury that convicted them, the judge gave the brothers life in prison without parole.
The Menendez trial became one of the most viewed televised trials of the 1990s, up until O.J. Simpson's trial began a couple years later. Almost 30 years later, the question still stands. Was the murder of Kitty and Jose Menendez justified because of the abuse inflicted on their sons? Or was there never any abuse at all, and the murderers were all about the money? Tell us what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching, and share with your friends.